Good morning. My name is Bill. I'm one of the pastors here at Southeast, but that's really only part of the reason that I'm here. I'm also a volunteer chaplain for the Louisville Metro Police Department, and 10 years ago, I retired from the Louisville Metro Police Department after 30 years of serving as a police officer. My son is on LMPD. I worked with George Rodman, Nick's dad. My other son is a Louisville firefighter, just beginning his career with the Louisville Fire Department. So I feel a special bond to the Rodmans, whose family is rich in the tradition of serving this community. We are here today to do three things. The first, we are here to pay honor to Nick Rodman. In doing so, Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher will represent the entire Louisville Metro government by paying tribute to Officer Rodman and his family, giving Nick the honor he deserves. Secondly, we're here to comfort friends and family. And Nick's brothers in uniform, Louisville Police Chief Steve Conrad and Louisville Metro Police Officer Rick Beal will speak of Nick's professional and personal life, allowing us to know more of the man that his family and friends love and cherish. And then finally, we are here to seek guidance, hope, and direction from the truth of God's word. Let's open with prayer. Father, we come filled with sorrow for the loss of a husband, a dad, a son-in-law, a brother, a cousin, and a police officer, a warrior, and a peacemaker. Father, will you enable the truthful words spoken today to bring comfort to his wife, Ashley, his friends, his family, his police family, and all attendants. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Mayor Fisher.
Nick Rodman swore his oath of office and joined the Louisville Metro Police Department in a ceremony at Iroquois Amphitheater on June 6, 2014. I was honored to be there, and I know many of you all were there too. Maybe you were among the families enormously proud of your son or daughter, or maybe you were one of the recruits, proud because you'd done the hard work it takes to get through the academy and earn the blessing of instructors like LMPD veteran officer George Rodman, Nick's dad. George, you had to be especially proud that day, seeing among all the recruits you trained, your own son step onto that stage, raise his right hand, and swear an oath to be, quote, faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as I continue as a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully execute to the best of my ability the office of Louisville Metro Police Officer according to law. And the oath ends with, so help me God. In his time with LMPD, it's clear that Nick believed that upholding the law was only part of his job, because while the law governs our actions, it's our values that really guide us. And one of Nick's values was compassion. He'd learned it at the Rodman family dinner table from George and from his mom, Linda, along with his sister, Carly, and his brother, Andy, another fellow LMPD officer. Nick practiced compassion through the love and devotion he showed his wife, Ashley, and their children, Mason and Ellie, who clearly gave him such joy. And he brought that compassion to the job, faithfully, every day and every night. Russ Lassiter studied with Nick at the academy and served with him in the 1st Division. Russ said, even when Nick was arresting someone, he treated them the way that he wanted to be treated. Nick was one of those cops who kept teddy bears in his patrol car to give to kids he encountered on the job who needed some comfort. One afternoon when Russ and Nick were patrolling on ATVs in Portland, Nick went into a store and came out with a big box of popsicles to give all the kids in the neighborhood. That was Nick. That's the standard that Nick set for himself as a police officer and a public servant and as a human being. And he was far from alone. Compassion is a fundamental part of police work. It's what enables the good men and women of LMPD to put the safety of others ahead of themselves. And I want to thank all of LMPD for that, for the times you have done that and the times ahead when you will. My hope for us as a community is that through this tragedy, with our hearts broken open, people see police officers more clearly as fellow human beings. People who love like them, people who cry like them, and most of all, people who deserve their support, respect, and appreciation. According to his buddies, Nick would be humbled and maybe a little bit embarrassed by anyone holding him up as an inspiration. But clearly, he was. And his passing has shown us all what a band of brothers and sisters working with purpose and unity looks like. And as your mayor, I know our city is in good hands, and I thank you. To the Rodman family, saying thank you isn't nearly enough. What you've given, what you've sacrificed for the people of Louisville is beyond anything that we can measure or repay. But just as Nick swore an oath to this city, I swear to you that we will do everything in our power to help Ashley, Mason, Ellie, and all of you in the days, months, and years ahead. We will never let Nick's compassion, service, and sacrifice be forgotten. And to all of our officers, we will never forget that each of you is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's brother or sister. I promise that we will continue to honor the commitment that you and your families are making to our city. So help me God. In closing, some words of prayer. Eternal rest grant unto Nick, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May he rest in peace. Amen.
Good morning. We've been brought together under very, very tragic circumstances. And I, like you, am still reeling from the events of this last Tuesday and Wednesday. Whether you're here as Nick Rodman's friends or family, co-workers or members of the community, we all share a profound sense of loss. But as hard as it is for each of us to be here, we need to use our time together as an opportunity to honor Nick's life and his accomplishments. Nick began his law enforcement career with the Louisville Metro Police Department actually as a police recruit on December 9th, 2013. And as the mayor said, he was sworn in as a police officer the following June. He served his community as a police officer in the 1st Division, and he performed all of his duties with enthusiasm, dedication, and above all, a great attitude. From my visits with Nick's family and from conversations with his coworkers and supervisors, I know that Nick will always be remembered for his great sense of humor, his great sense of honor, and as a great man. Nick was the kind of person that you just wanted to be around. Nick was the kind of man that you wanted to be able to call your friend. His division commander, Major Andrea Brown, told me that Nick was incredibly witty. He was always smiling, and he was just fun to be around. Nick was an athlete, and he treated the members of his squad as if they were all part of the team, and clearly Nick was a team player. One of his sergeants, Curtis Lipsey, told me that Nick was incredibly dependable. He was always there to help out whenever and wherever he could. And he showed us that quality this last June when one of the members of his squad, Officer Kyle Carroll, was shot. Nick was one of the officers who helped clear the route. Nick was one of the officers who helped carry Kyle into the hospital. Tragically, but perhaps fittingly, it was Officer Carroll who drove Nick to the hospital after Tuesday evening's collision. Teammates for sure. Clearly, there was and still is an amazing bond between the men and women of that platoon. To Nick's family, I share my condolences. There's nothing that any of us can say or do that will take away your heartache. But please know, we will always be there for you. Please know that Nick's sacrifice will never, ever be forgotten. He will be remembered forever as a true hero. And I want you to know that Nick will always be part of our team. To the men and women of the Louisville Metro Police Department, and to the broader law enforcement community that is represented here today, I pray that through this tragedy, we become stronger and more resolved in our efforts to support one another. Nick's tragedy and untimely passing has dramatically changed our lives, whether we knew Nick personally or not. It is in times like these that our uniforms all become the same color, that our ranks disappear, that our badges reflect the same light. Together, we are even more than a team. We are a family of protectors, and our service is to our respective communities. Nick's life was cut short, tragically short. So today, in this sad moment, we must rally around his friends and his family, knowing that they need us as much as we need them. Today, it's critically important that we take time to share our recollections of Nick's desire to work hard, to make a difference, and to answer the call of service. Because through shared memories and the spoken words of others, no one ever truly dies. Nick, may you rest in peace. It is now my honor to introduce LMPD Detective Rick Beal.
Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Rodman family, they would like to thank each and every one of you from the bottom of their hearts for joining us here today to honor Officer Nick Rodman, a man as good as any that God has to offer. First of all, I want everyone to know that the words I'm about to speak come from Nick's family. And when I say family, I not only mean the Rodman family, but also his brothers and sisters who stand behind me today, the members of his platoon. Fortunately for us, we've had the distinct privilege of working with Nick for the last few years. Nick was loved and respected by every one of us. Not too many of us can say they are liked by everyone they come into contact with. Nick Rodman can say that because he was liked by all. As Chief said, Nick was an athlete. He was involved in numerous sports since he was old enough to walk. He was a star football player at Mount Carmel. He attended Holy Cross High School, where he was an all-district and all-region football player, as well as a soccer star, graduating with a 4.0 GPA. He then went on to play soccer at Georgetown College, where he graduated with a 3.8 GPA. As proven with his grade point average, Nick was a very intelligent man. Andy, his brother, told me that it always irritated him because he never saw Nick studying or doing homework. But he always made straight A's. George told me that he found out many years after that the money he gave Nick for his college books was a lot of times not actually spent on books. We can only imagine what it was spent on. But Nick still made straight A's. Nick had an enormous amount of lifelong friends. Friends from Holy Cross High School, friends from Georgetown College, and his First Division Squad 3 friends. Nick was a person who meant the world to his coworkers. He was a hard worker, an honest police officer, and full of integrity. Nick led by example. Whenever a friend was in need, they could always depend on Nick. I've heard many stories from his friends, but the best stories I've heard by far were centered around 6', 4" Nick. Of course, in reality, Nick was not that tall. However, when need be, 5', 9" Nick could instantly become 6', 4" Nick. Nick never made a habit of giving 3/4 effort. It was always 110%. And when it comes to heart, there's not a ruler or scale big enough to measure Nick's. Nick loved being a Louisville Metro police officer. Nick didn't have enough time on the police department to be a training officer, but the sergeants would frequently put a recruit with Nick. And frequently, he served as acting sergeant for the shift. The reason he was trusted with these positions is because he could always be trusted to make the right decisions. When the shift was faced with a bad situation and everyone else was panicking, Nick would just stand there with his thumbs in his gun belt, with that enormous shit-eating grin on his face, and calmly say, "It's okay, boys. We got this. It's all good." Over the last few days, I've heard numerous stories about Nick, stories that I and everyone else was totally unaware of. Like the elderly gentleman who approached me in Portland just a few days ago and said, "I knew Officer Rodman. He was a good man." The gentleman said that he had ran out of gas on Main Street and Nick pushed his car out of the street. The man said he offered to help Nick push the car, but the man was elderly and had recently had an operation, so Nick would not allow him to help. He purchased some gas for the man and helped him on his way. And there's the time that Nick found a domestic violence victim walking in the cold. She was 7 months pregnant, had no money, and was left with nothing to eat. In true Nick fashion, he bought food for the lady and made sure she had shelter from the cold. And there's the man who wrote a letter just a few days ago saying that Nick had arrested him. The man said that Nick took the time to talk to him and listen to his problems. The man went on to say that since that night, he's been trouble-free. And because of Nick, he has turned his life around. The biggest point I'd like to make with these stories is that no one knew about these good deeds until citizens came forward and told their stories. Nick performed these acts of kindness and never told anyone. Of course, looking back, it doesn't surprise any of us. It was just Nick being Nick. Nick was the grandson of Papa Dave and Papa Joe. He cherished both men, and I was told that he never failed to make time for his grandfathers. Nick would drive home from college once a week just to have lunch with Papa Dave and then turn around and drive straight back. Papa Dave never missed a game and was heavily involved in Nick's life. Papa Joe would often take Nick, Andy, and Carly on road trips and eventually taught Nick how to drive. It's evident that both grandpas had a special relationship with Nick, the same type of relationship that I'm sure George will someday have with Mason and Ellie. When it comes to Nick the brother, he was always there when Andy or Carly needed him. And according to Dad, he never worried about the younger two when Nick was with them because even at an early age, he could be trusted to make the right decision at all times. Andy told me that Nick was not just his big brother, but he was also his best friend. He also said that sharing a room with his best friend during his entire childhood is something that can't be described in words. They made it a point to call each other every single night on their way to work just to say hi. And then there's Carly. This poor girl never stood a chance with Nick as a big brother. Whenever a boy would come to the house to pick her up, Nick would call his dad with the boy's license plate, just in case Dad wanted to investigate. And I'm sure he did. And there's the time that one of Nick's friends saw Carly out on a date and called Nick. Nick had his friend relay a message to the boy. A message I can't repeat in this building. Needless to say, I'm sure Carly's date behaved himself that night. According to George, Nick was the big brother that Mom and Dad always expected him to be. And he will be sorely missed by his little brother and his little sister. Nick the son. Nick was born on January 6, 1987. He was George and Linda's firstborn. And who could ask for a better son? He was a devoted husband and father, a loving big brother, a hard worker, and a loyal friend. And the reason for Nick being this type of person is because he was raised by two of the best parents God has to offer. It's easy to tell just how much Nick, Andy, and Carly, and of course Mason and Ellie mean to these two people. George was not just a dad. He was Nick's coach, his mentor, and along with Linda, his teacher of right from wrong. Nick followed in the footsteps of his dad and brother, which I know made George extremely proud. I was told of the special bond between Nick and his mom. Nick would call Linda every single day to check on her and tell her he loved her. George told me that even though Nick and Andy are adults and they carry a gun and badge for a living, to Linda, they were still just kids. He said that Linda would meet them in the alley behind their house when they were on their way to work, walk out to their car, and give them a packed lunch. George always got a big laugh when we talked about this. Nick shared many good times with his family. The family vacations, the trips to Keeneland, the family bowling trips on holiday evenings, and the tailgating at U of L football and baseball games. Everyone knew how passionate Nick was when it came to the U of L Cardinals. So much so that the last time U of L was in the Final Four, Nick didn't shower or shave, and he wore the same clothes, including underwear and socks, for the entire weekend. The good times and good memories will never be forgotten. Once again, Nick was the son that his mom and dad had taught and expected him to be. It was at Georgetown College where Nick met his wife, Ashley, the love of his life. To everyone who knew them, they were the perfect couple. Andy told me that the first time Ashley came around the family, he asked Nick, "So how long will this girl be around?" Nick's reply was, "Oh, you better get used to her. She'll be around forever. I love this girl and I'm going to marry her." According to George, Nick enjoyed being a husband and dad more than anything else in life. Nick would take Mason to the zoo or on long walks, even after he had worked a 12-hour shift and was facing another long shift that evening. Going without sleep was okay as long as he was with his babies. And although Ellie Jean was only 1 month old, they had already formed a bond that everyone could see. It didn't take long for her to become a daddy's girl. Not a night went by that Nick didn't have something to say about his family, because they meant the world to him. As I've already said, Nick excelled in all categories of life, but it was evident that Ash, Mace, and Ellie were his number one priorities. Being a dad was what he was best at. And considering who his parents are, that doesn't surprise me at all. Just like Nick the friend, Nick the police officer, and Nick the big brother, he was also the husband and daddy that his mom and dad taught and expected him to be. It's never easy to say goodbye to someone who means so much to so many, especially someone who was as positive as Nick was in every aspect of his life. I've tried my best to express just how much Nick meant to this world, but in reality, there are no words that can accurately describe just how much he was loved by everyone who was involved in his life. Officer Nick Rodman, 123 Baker, you will always be a member of the Louisville Metro Police Department, proudly and bravely serving the citizens of Louisville. Only now you will be a guardian for all, and you will be one of God's sheepdogs. Officer Nick Rodman, rest easy, my friend, and we will take it from here.
you came to me with your bad dreams and your fears, it was easy to see you've been crying. Seems like everywhere you turn, catastrophe reigns. Who really bothers from the dying? I could hold you in my arms. I could hold you forever. And I could hold you in my arms. Well, you kissed my lips with my mouth so full of questions.
She never mentions the word addiction in certain company. Yes, she'll tell you she's an orphan after you meet her family. Gives a smile when the pain comes. The pain gonna make everything alright. Then she talks to angels. They call her out by her name. Oh yeah, she talks to angels. Call her out by her name. She keeps a lock of hair in her pocket.
How fickle my heart and how woozy my eyes. I struggle to find any truth in your lies. And now my heart stumbles on things I don't know. My weakness I feel I must finally show. Lend me your hand and we'll conquer them all. But lend me your heart and I'll just let you fall. Lend me your eyes, I can change what you see. But your soul you must keep totally free. Ha, 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 ha. Awake my soul. How fickle my heart and how woozy my eyes. I struggle to find any truth in your lies. And now my heart stumbles on things I don't know. My weakness I feel I must finally show. Heart, 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 heart.
She'll lie and steal and cheat and beg you from her knees, make you think she needs it this time. She'll tear a hole in you, the one you can't repair. But I still love her, I don't really care. Oh, we did enough when it got cold. Ooh, we bundled up. I can't be told, I can't be done. It's better to feel pain than nothing at all. The opposite of love.
The Policeman's Prayer. When I start my tour of duty, God, wherever crime may be, as I walk the darkened streets alone, let me be close to Thee. Please give me understanding with both the young and old. Let me listen with attention until their story's told. Let me never make a judgment in a rash or callous way. But let me hold my patience, let each man have his say. Lord, if some dark and dreary night I must give my life, Lord, with your everlasting love, protect my children and my wife.
Officer Nicholas Aniceto Rodman was born Tuesday, January 6, 1987 in Louisville, Kentucky. He died on Wednesday, March 29, 2017 at the age of 30. Officer Nick Rodman is survived by his wife, Ashley, his 2-year-old son, Mason, and newborn daughter, Ellie. He is also survived by his father, Louisville Metro Police Officer George Rodman, his mother, Linda, brother, who is also a police officer with Louisville Metro, Andy Rodman, and his sister, Carly. His grandfather, Joe Ellis, in-laws, Christy and Jim Cole, and Greg and Lori Stegall, brother-in-law, Tim Stegall, and nephew, Jameson. And Nick is also survived by numerous other aunts, uncles, cousins, and loving family members. He was preceded in death by his grandparents, Dave and Jesse Rodman and Carol Ellis. But Nick's life is more than just statistics. After talking with family members and friends and just listening to the testimonies today, 3 words now come to mind when I hear the name Nick Rodman. The first word is family. You can't talk to anybody who knew Nick that's not the first word that would come up. And Nick and Ashley were a new family, and Nick was beginning to instill in his son Mason the Rodman family way. And I understand that Ellie already had her dad wrapped around her little finger. You heard about Sunday evening dinners. The family get together every Sunday. They continue that tradition. And I understand from Linda that the Rodmans all live within just a few blocks of each other, and it's not uncommon for a text thread to go out almost on a daily basis with all of the Rodmans' names, everybody in that text, so it's a continual conversation with their family. The other word that I think about is commitment. You heard his prowess at Holy Cross High School, a 4.0 GPA. Georgetown College, a 3.8 GPA. All district, all region football and soccer. There's not a thing that Nick didn't do, it appears to me, that he didn't do with excellence and full commitment. And he was a police officer. And to Nick, I understand that was more than just a job. It was his calling. Much as one is called into ministry, Nick was an officer, and he was an officer till the end. Nick was committed to whatever he did. But the third word that I think about when I think of Nick Rodman is faith. Nick was raised in a home and in an educational system that taught him about God. But you know, a person can know about God and not fully embrace him or his ways. Most men don't talk about their faith or talk about God, and I understand Nick was one of those men. So the reason I think of the word faith when I think of Nick Rodman was because of the way he lived. You heard Rick Beal telling the stories of how Nick on his beat would help people, and nobody knew about it till just this week, paying money out of his own pocket to help a man with gas, a woman 7 months pregnant with groceries. He treated prisoners with such respect that a person took the time to write back in and said Nick arrested him and that Nick made an impact on his life. And Linda told me that Nick was the great peacemaker of the family. And let me remind you that Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." Some men talk about their faith, and then when you hear the word Christian come up, you're surprised because they don't sure act like a Christian. Well, that's not Nick. He didn't talk about it. He just lived it. He did things that Jesus taught us to do, not just talk about them. And it's because of this that Nick's death is as much a tragedy as just tragic and senseless. And I think I'm safe in assuming that no one in here is comfortable about this, or no one is at peace about his death right now. I've got to be totally transparent with you. Last Tuesday, I was called to the hospital as a chaplain, and when chaplains are called, it's not good. We sometimes show up, but when we are called, we know it's bad. And that first doctor's report that I heard, he came in, talked to the family, it was bleak. And I had a feeling then, this is going to take a miracle to save him. And I asked Ashley if I could share what we had heard with the several hundred officers in the waiting room. And guys, you remember, some of you were there, I came out, and it was not good news, and we prayed. And I asked specifically for a miracle. Do you remember that prayer? God, will you give us a miracle? Will you allow Nick to walk out of this hospital, be reunited to his family? God, show us your power. And then about 2 hours later, the doctor came back in with a second report, and he said, I can't explain it. And he was very careful. Nick's not out of the woods yet. He said he hasn't turned a corner. It's still just 50-50, but we expected him to be this bad, and he's only this bad in some pressures that they were looking at. And the doctor said, we expected to be worse. And he was very careful again, but he said, I don't understand why it's not where it should have been. And I'll be honest with you, I sat in the corner of that small room and I thought, I know why. I went back out and I made another announcement. Men, women, you remember that announcement? And I said, Nick's condition hasn't improved. The doctors are still saying it's 50-50, but there was definite hope. And we left that hospital that night with definite hope. And I even had a prayer thanking God for answering the first prayer. And we continued, God, will you continue to heal Nick and allow him to walk out of this hospital? And on my way home that night, out loud in my car on the way home, I talked to God, and I was saying, God, you're going to do this, aren't you? You're going to heal this man, and you're going to show the power that you have as the creator of the universe. You're going to show up, and you're going to show a lot of people what you can do. Like, it doesn't normally happen. We pray for people, but you're going to do this. And I just couldn't believe it. I was so excited. The next morning, I stopped in the hospital just to check on things and found out that while Nick continued to improve a little bit, that night he took a very sudden turn very early in the morning, and his condition continued to worsen, and it was worse now than it was at the beginning. I sat at that hospital all day Wednesday, and I thought, God, you're showing up, right? We had a deal. Like, you're going to do this, right? You're going to come through. And then that afternoon, I was called to the second floor and asked to meet with his chief staff and a doctor, a surgeon, who was going to make an announcement. And when I asked what that announcement was, the surgeon said, Nick just passed away. I can't tell you the impact that that had on me. I'd never even met Nick. I can't tell you the impact that had on me. And I was angry. And I was in disbelief. I just couldn't believe it. And I hurt for his family. I hurt for the man that I knew, George. And I hurt for his entire family and for Ashley. And I was mad at God. And we went into that first room. Guys, you were in that room. It was a small chapel. And the doctor made that announcement to his platoon. And it was really an emotional scene. And the doctor even broke down and became emotional. And Chief, you looked at me and said, Bill, you're our chaplain. Would you pray for us? And sir, I want to be honest with you right now and tell you in front of these people, I wanted to say no. I wanted to say no. God is the last person I'm ready to talk to right now. No, I do not want to pray. But I did because the chief asked me to. And then we repeated that scene 2 more times. Can I tell you, it's okay to be mad. It's all right to be angry about things if being mad produces good anger, good actions, but that's not the type of anger I had. And I went home that night, and I got up the next morning, Thursday, and I was still mad. And I thought, man, Bill, you've got to resolve this. So I took my Bible and a notepad and went to Starbucks, and God was the last person I wanted to talk to, last person. And the Bible was the last thing I wanted to read at that time. I didn't know what I was going to read. I didn't know what I was going to write, but I knew in my mind it was the right thing to do, but my heart was saying, just be angry. And while I was sitting there, it came to mind to read Hebrews 11, a very familiar chapter to me. It's a chapter in the New Testament about the heroes of old. They're called the patriarchs. They're people who are renowned for their faith and trust in God. And I read it again, I've read it many times, but I saw something I'd never seen before, or impressed on me something I'd never seen. Is that many of these patriarchs, these men of old, these people renowned for the faith, died a horrible death. The writer said they faced jeers, they were flogged, they were beaten, they were unjustly persecuted, they were murdered with the sword, and one was even sawed in two. And he writes, these were all commended for their faith. Really? You're commended for your faith after that? So much so, he writes, the world was not worthy of them. These people of old are held in high esteem because they didn't lose their faith and trust in God, even though they had to walk through terrible circumstances, like the death of good people. Any of this sounding familiar? How did they do that? And is something that happened several thousand years ago, is that relevant to us today? Can we learn something from these people about what our reactions should be to this kind of tragedy? And how do we react to all of this in a way that is healthy and honoring to Nick? Well, the answer to those questions lie in the true definition of faith. The writer of Hebrews writes, faith is being sure of what you hope for and being certain of what you do not see. One translation says that faith is the evidence. That rung the bell for me as a police officer, the evidence of things that we cannot see. You see, faith is not blindly believing in something that you just can't explain. That's not faith, that's stupidity. Faith is hope and trust based on what we know. And this is what motivated those people of long ago. Their actions in faith were motivated by trust based on what they knew. And they only knew a couple things. They knew that God promised them a Messiah, a Savior, but they never met him. They didn't know who it was going to be, but they knew it was promised. And they knew God promised there was a better life than just this one. It was called a better country, another city, a heavenly one. And they weathered the injustice of life, and they even died because they were looking forward to a city whose builder is God. They not only kept on going, they kept on going through the hope in a promised Messiah. And it's clear when you read Hebrews 11 that the people had not yet received what was promised. But their faith was based on trust, and they were motivated by what little they knew is fact. And it's the same for us today in this situation as we say goodbye to Officer Nick Rodman. Let me just say there are several things, a lot of things in this life that none of us are ever going to completely understand. For instance, the death of a police officer who is trying to keep his family safe, or why a man is taken from his family at such a young age. Well, listen to what Moses wrote, and it's recorded in the book of Deuteronomy. He wrote, "The Lord our God has secrets known to no one, and we are not accountable for them. But we and our children are accountable forever for all that he has revealed to us." Tommy Nelson, a senior pastor at Denton Bible Church and a board member of the Dallas Theological Seminary, puts it this way. He said, when things happen in life you don't understand, when you are perplexed, when in times of doubt, lean into what you do know, not what you don't know. And that's what these ancients were commended for. They leaned into what they did know, not what they didn't know. And we too are walking through terrible circumstances, but can I say we know so much more than they did. We now know who that Messiah is. It's Jesus. We know that God says, never will I leave you nor forsake you. We know that Jesus was a man who was acquainted with sorrow, so we know he knows how we feel right now. We know that Jesus suffered death for the payment of our sin, and he offers forgiveness. We know that Jesus rose from the grave to conquer death and to give us hope for an eternal life. We know that Jesus said, in this world, you're going to have trouble, but take heart. I've overcome the world. We know that Jesus also said, I am with you always, even to the end of the ages. We can learn a great deal from these men and women of old. Lean into what you do know, not what you don't know. That's why the writer of Hebrews ends that chapter and begins a second one talking about these men and women with these words. He writes, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him, Jesus, who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you do not grow weary and lose heart. So Ashley, don't lose heart. You have to keep on going, but don't just keep on going through the hope of Jesus. Mason and Ellie need you. And George and Linda and Andy and Carly, don't just keep on going through the hope of Jesus. Ashley needs you now more than ever. And Christy and Jim and Greg and Lori and Tim, don't just keep on going. You keep on going through the hope of Jesus. Ashley needs all of you now more than ever. And you men and women in law enforcement, you cannot quit. You run with perseverance the race marked out for you. Your community needs you. You don't just keep on going either, but you keep on going in the name of righteousness and with the hope of Jesus. And in doing so, you will honor Officer Nick Rodman and help carry on his legacy. There are many things in life that we're never going to understand. Things that are just not fair. Don't get caught up in doubt. We can still trust Jesus. You can still lean on Jesus. Lean into what you do know, not what you don't know. One more thing we do know is that you don't have to earn your way for that life in eternity with Jesus. You know, a lot of people who believe in heaven think that God will, at the end of your life, somehow weigh your good deeds and your bad deeds, that you can do good things and it's your good things that get you into heaven. And if at the end of your life, if the good deeds outweigh the bad, then you're good to go. And if the bad deeds outweigh the good, then you're not so good to go. But you know what that is? There's nothing found in that. There's no truth in that. That's not what the eyewitnesses and followers of Jesus said. Listen to what Paul said. Now let me remind you who Paul is. Paul is a guy who used to kill Christians, and then he met the resurrected Jesus and he became one. This is what he said. For it is by grace you have been saved, by grace, through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it's the gift of God. It's not by works, so that nobody can boast. And may I remind you that grace is defined as God's unmerited favor and something that you receive that you really don't deserve. That's grace. And that's good news for Nick, and it's good news for all of us, because none of us are perfect. But God gives grace to who he wants and who asks for it, and he gives it to those who are willing to receive it. Johannes Berger, a 15th century Roman Catholic prelate who served as bishop, had a famous story that he talked about what's it like to die. And this is what he used to say. There was a town in the country, and this man and his son were going to walk into town, and it was raining that day, and they had to cross a footbridge, and it was over a creek. And since it had rained, the creek had raised up, and it was lapping over the top of the small footbridge, and it was kind of slippery. So the man picked his little boy up, and they walked across the bridge. And they went into town. They had a great time. They spent the entire day in the city, and then as they started to turn and walk, the sun was going down. They were going home. The little boy started to whimper. And his dad said, "Son, why are you crying?" And he said, "Dad," he said, "that bridge this morning, we barely got across it, and it's been raining all day, and now it's getting dark. How will we ever make it?" And this loving father just picked his son up and carried him in his arms, and he patted him on the back, and he sang songs to him, and the little boy fell asleep. Well, the next thing the little boy knew, it was the next morning. He was in his own bed. The sun was shining brightly through his window, and in the door of his bedroom, his dad was standing there with a big grin on his face. And Bishop Berger writes, "This is what death is like. What we fear the most never occurs. The valley of the shadow is never as scary as it appears to be when you're in your Father's arms. You simply wake up in his house on the other side." I believe that is what Nick Rodman experienced last Wednesday afternoon. Lean into what you do know, not what you don't know. We're going to close. Stephen Gould, a Louisville native and artist-songwriter, just now has composed an original song in honor of Nick and as a gift to Nick's family, as a gift to LMPD, and as a gift to our community. Will you listen to the words of this song, and then I will return and close in prayer.
When you wake not knowing if it's your last, that's the risk you take for your city. Always the first to respond before it's needed. That's the pledge you take, wearing the badge for the LMPD. And you say he's falling to the ground, rather he's an angel in the clouds. Not only did he give his life for his family, but to this Louisville city. With all that's going wrong in this world today, we need more of them who make us safe. Sacrificing all without even thinking, this is for my city. My biggest heroes wear more than just a cape. It's the uniforms they're in that make them great. They support our events and are always giving to this UofL city. And you say he's falling to the ground, rather he's an angel in the clouds. Not only did he give his life for his family, but to this Louisville city. Thanks is not enough. We give you all our love. You're in our hearts, your legacy carries on. You say he's falling to the ground, rather he's an angel in the clouds. Not only did he give his life for his family, but to this Louisville city, the LMPD, and to the UofL teams, for you and me. This is Nick Rodman City.
Will you pray with me? Lord, thank you for the gift of having Nick Rodman walk this earth for 30 years. Father, you've touched so many people with joy and happiness through him, but most of all, thank you for the gift of your son, Jesus, who allows Nick to enter into your presence. We thank you and ask your blessing on us in the name of Jesus. Amen. I've been asked to give you the following announcement. The honor guard will come in and dismiss you, so stay seated until they give you instructions on how to leave the sanctuary. And then for those who have never attended a police funeral, it's a little bit different in the procession to the cemetery. Nick will go last, and his brothers will lead him first, followed by family and close family, and then Nick. So as you exit and go to your cars, please listen to the instruction given you in the parking lot, and you will be told how to exit so that we may honor Nick with the best. Thank you. This concludes our service.